I truly want to build an organization that's focused on helping general counsel, not just to use legal as a response to the business, but help propel the business going forward. And we think that there isn't a firm that's solely dedicated to that on the complex side of work.
Today on LawNext, it was 1 year ago that Axiom Managed Services, one of two companies spun off in 2019 from alternative legal services provider Axiom, rebranded as Factor, a move the company characterized at the time as a relaunch. And it named a new CEO, Varun Mehta, a veteran of the legal tech industry who'd previously helped found the e-discovery managed services firm, The Clutch Group. So what's happened with Factor in the years since? And what's ahead for the company and the managed services industry more broadly? Varun Mehta joins me today to discuss those questions and more. This is Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to LawNext, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. We'll get to our interview in just a moment, but first, let's hear about the sponsors who make this show possible. In times of social distancing, law firms are relying on tools to interact with their clients from a distance. Case is the perfect tool to work with your clients, no matter how far apart you are. And they just announced their new two-way text messaging integration with Case Status that makes communicating a breeze. Now you can text your clients from Case and see all the messages in one place. Check out Case by visiting meruscase.com. That's MERUS case.com. Now on to today's interview. Varun, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for having me. I've been a long-time listener and excited to actually be part of it this time.
I was thinking about the fact that it was just over a year ago that you and I first spoke, when It was announced that you were joining the company as you were stepping into this position. And when we spoke, you were in London attending the Clock Institute. I'm going to guess you haven't done a whole lot of traveling since then. What's the year been like for you kind of personally on that level?
Yeah, no, it was, my first day was January 13th on the job. We officially rebranded January 15th and then announced me publicly on January 20th. And I remember when I joined, the team was like, hey, you need to go visit kind of every office we have around the globe. Originally, they wanted me to do it in the first 2 weeks. And I was like, guys, 2 weeks, that's a lot of travel. Can we split it up? Can we take some time? And they said, no. Well, and my head of HR, who's probably, I think, the best in the industry, Samara Hassan, goes, no, you should do it as quickly as you can. So I said, okay, that makes sense. And I'm so glad I did, considering by early March or late February, travel was something that seems so strange now. But it's been a crazy year, an interesting year, relaunching a company, new brand, new people, and doing that all kind of on Zoom or on Teams right. or on WebEx, depending on your preferred platform. So It's been an interesting year.
So with the benefit of hindsight, if you knew how 2020 would play out starting back in January, would you have taken the job?
Absolutely. Look, on a personal note, I feel really fortunate to have had the opportunity. As I think about, and I tell Mark this often, and not to Mark Harris, the founder of Axiom, I tell him this often, and not to toot his horn in any way, because at this point he's kind of stuck with me. So I when I was building Clutch, and I was leading marketing, I was leading sales, the brand I always envied was Axiom. I always felt like the way they told the story about the market, the way they brought people together, the way they delivered the value to general counsels and the lawyers that work for them was so unique, and all kind of Mark and his team and what they did. And I was envious of that. And so I feel, some days I feel like a kid in a candy store. I feel really fortunate to have this opportunity to kind of carry on this legacy, working closely with Mark Harris as the chairman of my board. And it's been, although kind of obviously tough not being able to meet people, not having in-person board meetings or leadership meetings or offsites, It's been a phenomenal journey, and I'm really proud of what we've accomplished in our first year.
Yeah, and for anybody who doesn't know, Mark was the founder of Axiom way back when, and now with Knowable, the other spinoff, when what's now Factor, also spun off. We can get into some of this stuff in more depth, but I'm just wondering. I was looking back at the conversation that you and I had back there in January, and I asked you at the time what you thought the biggest challenge would be to growing Factor. And you said at the time that it was the high level of cautious skepticism among corporate counsel. I'm going to read your quote to you. You said, "The biggest challenge I see is how willing, excited, and forthright are general counsel going to be about wanting to do something different. And where does a business like Factor fit into that stack?" So I'm curious, has this year made general counsel more or less willing to consider something different?
It's a great question, and I appreciate you reminding me of that. It continues to be our North Star in guiding us, right? Is making sure we're bringing the right thing that general counsels need, want, and will actually accept. I definitely believe, I don't mean to be political, I'm going to say both. I think I've had a number of conversations with general counsel. Frankly, I'll be honest with you, I've spoken to more general counsel in the last year than in my entire career prior. I think part of that equation has to do with I don't think general counsel really like talking about e-discovery and litigation investigation work.
Yeah.
They let their heads of litigation figure that out.
Yeah.
But I think the other part of it is I think general counsels are looking for something different. I actually believe the willingness has been greater than I expected, but we have to think about this not in terms of, often you hear the word transformation.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard half a dozen general counsel tell me they don't like that word because transformation sounds very risky. And I know that we can say that that's a mindset shift that needs to happen or whatever, but we need to adapt. We need to come up with ways that general counsels can adapt piece by piece that ensures risk mitigation and protects them, but also allows them to change for the business for the better. And I think that they are very excited about that. Some of the general counsel I've talked to are a bit overwhelmed with the amount of new, whether it's services, technologies, things being thrown at them. And I think that one of the most important parts of our market will be transforming from, hey, I'm calling a partner that I know is the best at, employment law at Cravath to solve a problem for me, to this new world of working and making it feel almost as seamless, right?
Yeah.
And that's a job that, all of us in both legal tech and legal services, alternative legal services or new law have to focus on as we go forward.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So let's just step back a second because I wanted to ask you about your background before joining Factor and then talk a little bit more about Factor. So let's start there. Can you tell us what you were doing and what your background was before you came to the company?
Sure. So I'm a biomedical engineer by training.
Out of Boston University, right?
Out of Boston University, right in your backyard. I spent a ton of time in Boston, still hold a deep place in my heart. And then, the beauty of going to biomedical engineering at Boston University was Boston, Cambridge, that area is arguably the largest medical device market in the US and potentially the world. So, I spent some time working at places like Boston Scientific, at J&J's DePuy businesses. And so, I was able to really jump into those experiences. And I think personally, I realized while I was really interested in the subject matter, whether this is just a young, naive Varun or it's just built into my personality, large organizations were not my cup of tea. I don't think I could work in them, working for a division of a division of a division. And 23, 22-year-old Varun said, hey, I want to go make a difference in the world. And, spending 10 years at these companies, maybe I'll make manager or maybe I'll make senior manager. It's going to take too long. So I wanted to find a different path. So I looked at some companies that I had some friends that I knew some people were starting. One of them was in the legal services space. At the time, it was LPO was the hot buzzword, Bob, as you remember, legal process outsourcing. And that business that we started at Clutch was truly founded like a lot of the LPO businesses. It was founded by a guy named Jerry Rao, who had founded a business called Emphasis that became the fourth largest BPO business, IT back office BPO. They had sold to EDS. They became EDS's kind of outsourcing arm in India. And Jerry Rao, if you read Thomas Friedman's The World is Flat, Jerry was the main, kind of one of the main characters in Bangalore. And Jerry said, hey, if we've done it in IT, why don't we try it in legal? And, so I was on the founding team of Clutch. And, the original thesis was that we would be the first multi-shore provider. We had bought a business called Clutch Legal Staffing out of DC that did contract attorneys for big law firms and companies. And then we had our offshore center in Bangalore, and that was kind of how we started the business. That was day one as I joined and we kicked off. So high level, I'll say, my original goal was spend 3 years doing that and go get my MBA. And I didn't know anything on legal. To be frank, I wasn't passionate about disrupting legal. It was a business that I felt that was new and in a new market and interesting. So I dug in and kind of fast forward, we learned a lot in the first few years, as you do. It's all about product market fit.
Yep.
What is the problem you're going to solve and for who? And we really had kind of figured out that, hey, we can't just do offshore lawyers for in India. There has to be a better way. So we kind of packaged a complete product or solution focused on litigation investigation work, where we would do all the technology. It was still early. We weren't the first to do it, but we were definitely early. Everyone does this now. Technology to review. We were the first to do a lot of things in predictive analytics, and we only did it for financial services and life sciences. I always felt that focusing on an industry to really understand the business operations of those businesses would help with better legal outcomes. We built that business, ended up exiting it to Moray Legal, another new law provider, ALSP provider that's focused more on the consulting side of the stack. And after that, I left. 10-year journey. Obviously, didn't get my MBA, but I learned a lot along the way. And after I left, I kind of said, hey, I never really deliberately made a decision to jump into legal. So I was like, I give myself the opportunity to go explore other things. So I looked at a number of other markets, industries that were evolving, that were changing. One of the more interesting ones was in the food and beverage space. So Bob, I know we're coming off of just the end of legal week, but I went to, it was a show called Expo. We were looking at doing kind of healthy beverages, natural organic ingredients. And I had teamed up with someone who was the king in the beverage industry, I'd say. So I was kind of his right hand. And we went to Expo in LA. I will tell you, and I mean this with no offense to the people that put on great events in the legal show, it was way better than the best event in legal of all time. You get to try samples of amazing new products and foods. And it was a lot of fun.
Sounds like more fun than Legal Week for sure.
It was definitely more fun, and I mean it with all respect. But it was a lot of fun. I think as I went kind of down that journey, I also kept getting pulled back in. So a good friend of mine, Raj Goyal at Bodala, another legal tech business in the legal spend analytics space, said, "Hey Varun, can you just come help me talk to my team a bit?" So I would do that because he's a good friend and I've known him for a long time. And then I kind of was getting pulled back in because, what I realized, Bob, was that the problems in legal still seem to be so big.
Yeah.
Like food and beverage doesn't need Varun. And you could say that legal doesn't need Varun either. That'd be a fair statement. But I had done quite a bit in this market. I knew a lot of the people. I knew a lot of the players, and we had, in our small corner of the world at Clutch, solved a problem that helped the leading banks change the way they did litigation investigation work. And I said, that's really interesting. So I really then started actually going down the path of doing three things. One was I said, hey, why don't I advise some legal tech businesses and kind of help them raise money and then invest in them as an angel investor.
Yeah, including Bodala, right?
Including Bodala. I'm an investor. I'm on the advisory board there. And I was actually exploring launching my own fund in the kind of legal risk and compliance space. So that was kind of something that I was really anchored on and I was building towards. And then the other thing was there's so much interest in this market as you commonly report on. So I was working with a number of private equity firms that were looking to invest and helping advise them as someone who had spent some time in the industry.
Yeah.
And through that process, you just meet a lot of people. That's always I love meeting new people, learning new things. And I met the folks at AMS and, fast forward, they said, hey, would you be interested in coming into consideration for the role of CEO? I think they were interviewing 3 or 4 people. I said, I'm interested. Let's take a look. I knew that I'd have to put any of the other big things I was doing on hold. I talked to Mark, I talked to the board, and I was really impressed. And I fortunately was able to join the company. Sorry, I know it was a bit long, but it's been an interesting journey, and I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So I want to also turn to kind of the history of Factor. And I know you've only been there a year.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because Factor is, in one sense, it's a year-old company. In another sense, it's a 10-year-old company.
Yeah.
So maybe you could put that in perspective for listeners who aren't aware of the history of how you got to become Factor.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It is interesting because we're a 500-person startup, as I like to say, and it's a lot of fun. What's exciting about Factor is inside of Axiom. One thing I'll say is Axiom and under Mark Harris's leadership, of course, Elena as well, who took over shortly after as CEO. There was a quality point that they always stuck to, and they said, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it really well, and we're going to do it in a quality-driven way that feels like you're hiring a cravat, right? You're hiring a Paul Weiss. And so this business around managed services was being built inside of Axiom. But what I love about Mark Harris and the way he's kind of built his businesses, and now he's doing it with Noble, is, most of the market is press release first, and then the product may come sometime later.
Right.
And customers may never come.
Right.
And I mean this with all respect, but I get that's how the markets operate. I've done that.
Right.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah, we'll build it after we sell it.
They were building it, and a lot of people didn't even know they were building it. It was hidden inside of that. Hidden inside of one of the largest companies focused on managed services, was hidden inside of Axiom. And most people didn't even know how big it was and what they were doing. Yeah. And I didn't, and I was in the market. And I was really impressed when I got here to see the types of clients we had. I mean, literally Fortune 50, Fortune 20, like just blue chip clients. Forget any new law provider, any big law firm would envy and dream of. But these were 5-7 year engagements. Like that doesn't happen anywhere in legal, right? And so that was really impressive for me. What the business didn't have, or what the business was lacking as it spun out, was an independent identity, an independent leadership team, an independent vision. And that's what we were able to bring in the last year. So it's been fun. We had some great leaders already in the business. I talked to Sumaira Hassan, my head of people. I will kind of stake my reputation on this. I think she's the best in the market, in the legal services market, and one of the best HR professionals I've had a chance to work alongside in my career. We have Chris DeConti, who I know you've spoken to in the past. Yeah. Chris, was one of the original, when he was a CB, founders of the General Counsel Roundtable. He really understands how general counsel think and how you derive solutions to problems that make sense. And he was with Axiom for some time. And then, bringing on people, and then Sandy Devine, who has a history in kind of large scale outsourcing in a commercial perspective that she brings, but also spent time at Axiom and led Europe for Axiom while she was at Axiom. So we got the Axiom side, and then we brought in some new leadership, which has really been great. Roxanne, who was a bit with Axiom, but also I think of it as she was there towards the end. So she didn't get so she was former Accenture, built a lot of their managed services arms and businesses. John Dillon, she's our COO. John Dillon, our CFO, spent time at Mercer and was a CFO of one of the largest Mercer businesses. For those that don't know, one of the largest HR outsourcing and advisory shops out there. And then Ed Sohn, who has spent a lot of time in the market, being a P3 alum, TR alum, and then EY alum.
And who's been a guest on this podcast.
And has been a guest on this podcast, yeah. Ed's great. He brings a lot of some of the best ideas in the market on how to solve some of these problems. So what's exciting is we have this client base, this original team of people. We have great delivery capability and execution experience, which is usually the hard part.
Yeah.
When you go to a GC, they say, well, have you done this before? We can, with a straight face, say, not only have we done it before, we've been doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
But we're bringing a new set of ideas, a new way of doing it.
Yeah.
And so it's really a fun experience. And we have great team members.
When Axiom Managed Services spun off as a separate company in 2019, it had been developing as a business within Axiom for nearly a decade. But what it lacked, Mehta says, was an independent identity, an independent leadership team, and an independent vision. That independent identity came a year ago when the company rebranded as Factor, and you've just heard Mehta describe how he's assembled an independent leadership team in the years since. But what about that independent vision? When we return to LawNext, I'll ask Mehta about his vision for the company now and into the future. But first, let's hear about the generous sponsors who make this show possible. Every successful lawyer needs a powerful sidekick. That's why thousands of legal professionals trust Case to automate their daily tasks so they can use their time to help clients not update spreadsheets. From e-signature features to hyper-organized communications and text messaging capabilities, Case saves you time and provides you and your clients with peace of mind. To learn more about how Case can increase your firm's efficiency, visit meruscase.com. That's MERUS case.com. Welcome back to LawNext. 1 year ago, Axiom Managed Services, one of two companies spun off in 2019 from alternative legal services provider Axiom, rebranded as Factor and named a new CEO, Varun Mehta, to lead it into the future. You've already heard from Mehta about some of what's happened in the year since. But as we return to our conversation, I ask him about his longer-term vision for the company and how a major investment in the company last August will influence that vision. We also talk about just what exactly it is that a managed services company does. Well, you said that part of the problem, if you want to put it that way, was that you had this company as a standalone company, but it didn't really have a clear vision of what it was as a standalone company. So how has that evolved over the year? What is the vision for what Factor is and what it's offering to its customers?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about where we want to go, I think the first word you're always going to hear from anyone in our business is focus. If you look at, and to me, I think oftentimes people in new law actually kind of ridicule or, maybe kind of poo-poo what law firms have built, but they still control 90+% of the market. So we have to look to what they've built. When Skadden was built back in the 40s and 50s, they were built around this notion that, hey, we're going to be the best at representing clients in the buyout and kind of private equity buyout world that nobody else wanted to represent. And we're going to be really good at M&A. We're going to be really good at M&A. And then eventually they built other practices originally anchored around M&A. You need employment help around M&A. You're going to need some litigation stuff around M&A. And now obviously they've become a multidisciplinary firm with a number of offices. I think, we want to adopt a similar mantra. I love what Cravath has built. I don't know, Bob, if you've read this book, Last Days of Night.
No.
It's a phenomenal book about Paul Cravath and Thomas Edison and George Westinghouse. But it's technically fiction, but a lot of it's nonfiction. I really enjoyed it. But then I've read a lot about how Cravath was built after that. And if you see it, it's so focused on high quality, so focused on just executing well on a few areas, not trying to be the biggest or biggest thing to everyone, all things to all people. We will remain focused. That will be first. What are we focused on? Complex legal work at scale. Bridging the gap between traditional law and new law, bridging the gap between business and legal. What the gap that we see in the market, right now, oftentimes general counsel are forced in trade-offs of saying, well, can I use a law firm or do I have to use offshore lawyers in the Philippines or India? I don't think that's a logical choice for clients, right? They need experienced lawyers, but in a new format that gives them the outcomes and efficiencies and results they expect from a legal perspective, but at a cost that's more reasonable than a white shoe firm in New York. For too long, we've seen clients choosing between expertise or efficiency. We think that is a false trade-off. We think that you can bring expertise and efficiency together in the right way and then do it in a way that helps general counsel deliver better outcomes for their business, because that's what they're there to do. And I truly want to build an organization that's focused on helping general counsel, not just to use legal as a response to the business, but help propel the business going forward. And we think that there isn't a firm that's solely dedicated to that on the complex side of work. And so that's kind of what we're really focused on doing. Right now, we think that one of the biggest problems in the markets is around transactions. Every business, the heart and lifeblood of a business is a transaction. You're buying something, you're bringing on a new employee that requires a contract. You're buying a new piece of software to change your business, you need a contract. You need to transact better. You need to onboard that supplier through compliance or risk or other issues. And you're selling something to a customer. That's a transaction. You're buying a company. That's a transaction. So we're anchoring around this notion of how can we help companies transact better with really experienced legal talent, process expertise, technology know-how, and knowing how to bring all of those pieces together is no small feat. And that's what we want to be good at.
Yeah. I sometimes feel that the term managed services can be somewhat ambiguous or subject to different understandings or interpretations. And sometimes I think that's just because I'm stupid. Other times I don't, because I recently came across an article written by professors at Harvard who said the same thing, that it can be ambiguous sometimes. So what does it mean to you? What is managed services? What is it exactly that you offer to your clients?
I think that's a great question, and I don't think, by the way, it's you missing the market off. I actually think half of the problem in our market that I've learned is that we don't have a standard way of talking, and that actually has held us back. Right? Every tech is trying to say it solved everything around CLM, but we've actually, as a company, by the way, not to go off on a tangent, we've mapped the CLM process in a way that there's 6 to 8 different unique parts of it. Different parts of tech are good for different things. If you remember back to the EDRM days, once our friend George Sosha and others in Working Group 6 at the Sedona conference put together the EDRM model, then it made much more sense. And now You've seen that become a really industrialized process.
Yeah.
That's what will happen with other parts of legal. In our view, what is managed service? Right now, what you want general counsel to feel, companies to feel, is that they can trust you with a problem and delivering an outcome towards that problem. Not deliver you resources, not deliver you a report. Weirdly, a lot of people, and this may be a hot take that people may not disagree with me on, law firms provided a managed service, right?
Right.
You called a partner, said, I have this problem. You guys didn't sit there and draft some massive SOW. Oftentimes they work without even a contract. Right. And then the law firm wouldn't say, well, would you rather use our associates in Chicago or Columbus? The partner would figure out what's the right team to solve this problem. And at the end of the day, they would go and try their best to solve the problem. Most often, it wasn't with tons of Gantt charts, RACIs, reports. It was with a bill. And the challenge was that bill was too expensive. And so that's kind of where we're trying to tackle some of this stuff.
Right. You're selling a result, not a service.
You're selling a result, not a service. And so what we need to do is anchor around selling a result, right?
Yeah.
And so for us, when we sell a result, it's bringing together it can't be about where your resources are. It can't just be about labor arbitrage, which is honestly, when you talk about legal services, 70 to 80% of the conversation is around legal arbitrage. The other 20 to 30% is how can tech remove the people. Let's move away from that. What is the outcome we want to accomplish? What are the risks we're willing to live with or not live with to accomplish that outcome? And then it's mapping out, well, what are the processes, tools, systems, and people we need to do that? But package that in a way that feels as easy to use as an iPhone, or as easy to use as calling your law firm that you like to call. That is what we want to deliver as managed service. We're not there yet, but that's where we want to go.
Yeah. So when does a general counsel hire you as opposed to hiring a law firm? And when might a general counsel hire both you and a law firm?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think when you break down if we go back to the analogy that we just talked about, if we break down achieving an outcome, right? So what could an outcome be? A company is buying another company. As part of that M&A transaction, there are a number of legal steps and tasks that have to happen. In that instance, you're going to say, okay, we need someone to address some of these tasks, and we need other people to address the tasks. So the way I kind of always tell general counsel is I say, wherever you need 80% advisory, 20% execution, that is where you either should have those capabilities in-house or you should hire a great law firm that can do that work for you. Wherever it's 20% advisory, 80% execution, that's where we are well suited to delivering a outcome for you. So in an M&A transaction, if you hired, you would need to hire both a law firm and factor. A law firm would do everything related to drafting your transaction documents, making sure that the entities are structured right. Like, kind of, that is a price that's worth paying because that's an important part of the business, right?
Yeah.
But after having gone through a number of transaction M&A type processes, whether it's raising money, buying businesses, selling businesses, the law firms are not very strong at project management around a transaction. There are 30 different work streams, different pieces that need to be accomplished. Someone needs to run a transaction management process. That's where Factor can work alongside. So we are the PMO office to the law firm's legal expertise. Okay. Yeah. Then Factor can bring some really good support on, okay, well, we need to look at a lot of the customer contracts. We need to look at a lot of the vendor contracts. What are the risks in those? Do they match up to what the company stated? That's where we would want to get advice and guidance for what are the big problems you're looking for, law firm, in this. Let us go find that, right? And that's where we can deliver a ton of value. And then after the execution is done, then you may need to repaper some of those contracts. Hey, company A has a contract with Dell, and company B has a contract with Dell. Let's figure out who has a better deal. Let's repaper it. Make sure that one is over superseding the other. We need to get those structured. That is where Factor would come in. So that's kind of a really good way. That's like when a general counsel will hire us for a project or for a specific problem or requirement. Yeah. But another way where a general counsel would just hire, and that's where they'd hire us at a law firm. Another way where they just hire us would be, for a number of big companies, we are their procurement contracting. Everything they buy, up to, let's say, and different companies have different stress threshold, up to, like maybe accept their top 10 or top 20 providers. We do all the contracting for them, drafting, negotiation, and contracting. And we bring a lot of rigor to that. Now, in that instance, when would you maybe need a law firm? Let's say you're launching a new entity a company's launching a new entity in Kazakhstan, and you want to make sure the entity's set up right, and you're diligencing the vendors appropriately, or even setting up vendor contracts in Kazakhstan properly for your new entity. I don't think Factor is a good solution for that. There's probably a partner that knows the Kazakhstan market well, at a big firm that knows the legal structures well, that knows how vendor relationships happen there. But once you set that up, once you get the initial guidance done, then we can take that and we can continue to replicate it and drive it forward with the playbook. We can continue to replicate it with our skills. So that's another instance of where a general counsel would hire us and we would become part of their team. For most of our clients, we actually are onboarded into their systems. Most counterparties think of us as at employee.com, at client.com email address. They don't know it's someone else. But our view is that we can run kind of a large team of lawyers in a managed service setting to deliver strong outcomes better than a law firm or a company, because this is all we do for a living. This is our bread and butter.
And so I know that earlier this year, not earlier this year, in 2020, you announced a partnership with Allen and Overy on LIBOR remediation. So what does that look like? I mean, how does that work? Are you offering your services through the law firm, or is that kind of a package deal that a company buys?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and I think one thing that you'll see is we're going to be having a number of new partnerships announced with professional services firms, with law firms, and technology providers where we fit into the equation where others don't fit. So in the LIBOR world, look, LIBOR is a very complicated, parts of it have tons of complications and complicated work streams. Lots of it just require a lot of work. In the example that I mentioned to you for M&A, we can just take that example and switch LIBOR and
Yeah,
switch,
yeah.
law firm, Allen and Overy and factor into it. Allen and Overy is providing kind of the legal advice and judgment for how a bank should repaper this. What should the terms be? What are the risks? And each bank, if you think about these banks, one of the banks we're working with has, 150 different products with LIBOR, hundreds of thousands of customers against it. And so there has to be a structured way that you think about different tiers of customers, different tiers of work. Where we come in is helping to execute against that. So once kind of the legal questions have been answered, once kind of a decision has been made, we go off and we go execute. Now, there will be times where things don't fit perfectly in the framework that we've all agreed to. And that's where we'll say, hey, Alan and Overy, we need your help deciding on this part of this problem. And it allows Allen and Overy to scale because the problems in the LIBOR space, that the scope is so big that a firm like Allen and Overy, as big as it is, could get enveloped by just one bank if they just did all of the work, right? So this allows them to make sure they're supporting a number of clients on the things that they're best at on the advisory side. And we're focusing on things like PMO, on reporting, on the use of technology, on repapering and remediation. And we're looking at other use cases. You'll see at the Skills Conference, we teamed up with Aiken Gump for a couple of clients, and we're doing some interesting work with them. And you're going to see more of that come about because we do think that there is an exciting blend where law firms can focus on what they're really good at and where we can focus on where we're really good.
Varun, back in August, you have had a busy year. It was announced that Carrick Capital Partners would multiply its stake. Is already an investor, in fact. It would multiply its stake, and the dollar value of the investment was not disclosed, but it was stated at the time that this represents one of the biggest net new investments in the global legal solutions market. So what does that investment mean for Factor and for its future growth and development?
Absolutely. No, we were really excited to partner with Carrick. Carrick has a strong reputation in kind of the managed services. I know we talked a bit about managed services,
Yeah.
but they own businesses in areas like HR and compliance managed services, IT, healthcare. So they really know that space well, and they bring a ton of expertise, knowledge, and guidance to that. For us, what we're uniquely focused on, once again, is this idea of what are the problems the general counsel need us to solve, and how do we couple that with the experience we have as being a decade-old business, but bring a new angle to it, new technology, new thinking, new resources. So for us, this investment was exciting in the sense that as a business, while we didn't necessarily need capital, because the benefit of being a 500-person startup is you have customers that have been with us some as long as 10 years that we operate and we can be self-funding. But this allows us to go do some bold things, whether it be partnerships, whether it be investing in technology, bringing on, and we won't be building our own, but going out and saying, hey, we're going to go and we're doing this today. As I mentioned, we've mapped out the CLM space. We see the different areas, and we're literally going out and starting to do pilots and bake-offs in each category. What tool works well for what? Redlining. What tool works well for data extraction? What tool works, and in what context? And really run these tests in a way that, I think GCs get so exhausted by doing the demos and the pilots and then like trying to do the implementation. We want to get really good at saying, hey, we know how this tech works. We've beaten it up. It's really good at this. It's not so good at this. And you should never touch it for this. That'll be one area. The other is just bringing on more great talent. I think oftentimes in our market, we do forget the human aspect of this, but we think that, the human part of this journey is going to be huge. Our goal is to continue to double the business in the next couple of years. And to do that, we need to have strong leaders. We brought on Michael Callier, who's just, at some point, Bob, you should talk to him, but as a former GC, he was in Davis Wright and Tremaine's innovation group, so he's got experience from like a law firm perspective in house at places like Nike and Marigold. So we're constantly going to be investing in bringing on the best minds in legal to help us solve these big problems. Great operational capability and expertise, how we leverage and use technology, because while we think CLM is so important for the next decade of legal tech, we think that GCs won't be able to figure it all out on their own, and they're going to need a partner like us to help them. And then finally, it's going to give us a chance to go try to build new products and solutions that, maybe people haven't tried before. Some of them may not work. That's okay. That's how we're going to go kind of change this market.
As I said at the outset, this is probably not the year that you thought it was going to be when you signed up for this job. But what do you think the impact of this year has been on the managed services market? What do you think it's going to look like going forward from here? Will it be different because of what we've just been through or what we're still going through, or not?
I actually think it will. I think that there has constantly been this notion that I need someone with X type of skills or, experience sitting next to me in my offices. I need to be able to go run into them or talk to them really quickly. I think there is going to be a further delineation between expert kind of advisory and execution. And you're already seeing it. I mean, I'm talking to general counsels who they may not go with us for managed service, but they're thinking about centers of excellence. They're thinking about different places that work can be done, different ways that work can be done. So I think what will happen as we go forward is that, more and more you're going to see legal departments kind of figuring out, hey, here's our operating system. And that is, I think, the most important thing that I think this weird year that we've had has helped speed up, because oftentimes I don't think that legal departments have either had a chance to, had an interest in, or been required to really figure out, well, what's our operating system? How do we serve the business well? And when everything is happening remotely, it has its own set of challenges. We have a number of, by the way, clients that are coming to us saying, hey, we need a better way to intake quote unquote matters from our customers, because they think of the business as a customer. Like, these are new types of problems, because before it used to be, John called Sally. John was in the business. Sally was his lawyer and said, hey, can you figure this out for me? And then Sally would go figure it out. Well, now, John and Sally have never met. John went to a different bank or a different company, and there's a new Patrick there or whatever. So there needs to be a better flow to this, better visibility to what's the work that's happening. Why is it happening? Because if the goal of the general counsel is to manage risk, there needs to be both a specific view to it, which is usually where it's anchored, but there needs to be a holistic view. Where are our people? What are they doing? Why are they doing? And how are we enabling them to do more, better?
Makes a lot of sense. One of the things I like least about podcasts is that I always have to bring the conversation to an end at some point, and we need to do that. But before I do that, I just wanted to ask if you have anything else that you'd like to, any sort of final thoughts that you'd like to share with us. I've been asking you lots of questions, so here's your chance to add anything else that you'd like to say.
Bob, no, I don't think I have a ton. I guess the one plug I'll give is we are hiring a lot. We hired about 200 people last year. We're probably going to be hiring somewhere between 100 to 200 again this year. So if you're listening to this and you're interested in changing the way the world and legal work, come give us a shout at factor.law. I'm sorry for the shameless plug there, Bob. So
that's absolutely fine.
That's important. But I just wanted to, I guess, one question I'd have back to you is like, how do you see the next kind of 5 years playing out with the pandemic, with all these providers, with the technology? What are you seeing? You get to have a number of these great conversations with some of my peers, and kind of what is the big cautionary tale and what is the optimistic tale to that in your mind?
If I had the answers to questions like that, I'd be on the other side of the microphone. I just ask the questions. I don't answer them. No, it's it's going to be really interesting. I certainly think that we were talking about terminology earlier, and I have throughout this interview I haven't used the term alternative legal services providers, but that was a term that used to be used quite a bit with regard to your industry. And I was thinking at some point that word alternative just no longer applied, and that was true. And I think the market is really going to evolve in dramatic ways over the next few years, and I tend to think that the likelihood of regulatory change, legal regulatory change in the United States is further going to drive that market here. So
Agreed.
That's all the insight I have to share.
No, I agree with both of those. It'll be fun to continue to have these conversations over the coming months and years as those happen. And I think there will be a kind of stratification of some of these things, and it'll be interesting to see how that comes together.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm going to have to have you back a year from now, and we'll do another year catch up and see where things have gone between now and then.
That would be great. We'd always love to talk to you, and thanks for all you do in bringing the community together.
Yeah, thanks. Well, thanks. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you, and hope you stay well and have a healthy and happy and successful rest of the year.
Same to you. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks to Varun Mehta, CEO of Factor, for joining me today on LawNext. I hope you enjoyed the show. LawNext is produced, engineered, and edited by Populous Radio. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of LawNext.